Hi, and welcome to this session where we talk about how Nottingham Trent University is engaged with incorporating sustainability into its curricula. My name is Rob Ackrill. I'm Professor of Economics and I'm a National Teaching Fellow of the 2014 cohort.
And I'm Helen Ponther. I'm the lead of the Green Academy at NTU, and our team focuses on supporting colleagues to integrate sustainability into the curriculum. And today I'm joined by our NTU Peregrine Falcon and Chick.
My name is Katalin Batlendi. I work on Helen's team in the Green Academy, but today I'm here wearing another hat. I'm here as a representative of a staff continued professional development group, a grassroots self-development group, and I'll be telling you about how we work together as a group of educators to embed sustainability in our teaching and learning. And now I'm going to start sharing our screen so that Robert can start the presentation.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. So to get things going, I just want to provide a bit of an overview to where sustainability fits into the whole agenda at Nottingham Trent University. And as you can see, we've described this both as top-down and bottom-up. There's a wide range of activities across the teaching, the research, and indeed, if you like, the management processes across the university. So this is something that has become deeply rooted and deeply embedded in the culture of Nottingham Trent. I'll give a quick introduction before Helen and Katalin give more details and practical examples for the ways in which sustainability has been embedded in the curriculum. And I'll also say something about some of the general institutional structures within which that is being implemented. So if we move to the next slide, all I've got here is just a few general indicators of not just what we do, but the success we've had by undertaking so many different activities in this particular area. And as you can see, we've been pretty much at the top of the global rankings for a little while now. And that is important as an indicator that this is not something that's new. We've been doing this for a long time. It's really built up a lot of credibility across a wide range of activities in terms of, as I say, the running of the university and its research and teaching structures. Now, again, if we move on to the next slide, I've just got a few indicators here of the kind of activities we're doing. And so in terms of the top-down activities, the university is looking to reduce energy use, waste, paper travel, paper use. It's encouraging active travel. It has a kind of a fun, competitive green reward scheme for people who can get engaged and involved on a friendly, competitive way in terms of how environmental and sustainable they can be. And across the research, one of the 5 main university themes is sustainable futures. And across the teaching, again, right across the institution, we have the Sustainable Development Academic Forum. So these are structures that are put in at the top of the university, but engage the whole of the university in all of these activities. But coming up from the bottom, there's a lot of academic-led activities. We see this, for example, in my school, in the business school, with one of the research centres, which is absolutely focused in these areas, and it's split into 4 themes, one of which is teaching and learning in sustainability. That's led by my colleague, Professor Petra Moulton-Hill, who some of you may know already. Then also, again, this is a university initiative, but it's very much about bottom-up academic engagement and the driving of agendas. We have something called TILT, the Trent Institute of Learning and Teaching, which has established a number of practice and scholarship groups where academics come together, identify an area of interest, and establish their own practice and scholarship groups with great support from the university, but these are very much bottom-up initiatives. And it's at this point I shall hand over to my colleagues Helen and Kathleen, who can tell you much more about the practical detail, which I'm sure most of you are really wanting to hear about. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. So in terms of the Trent Institute of Learning and Teaching, as Robert mentioned, this is a grassroots bottom-up approach to developing educators, and it is an organizational network. We have the aim of creating communities of practice, creating opportunities for staff to engage in the scholarship of teaching and learning, and create more visibility for examples of good practice. So these are the three main initiatives of TILT, the Trent Institute of Learning and Teaching. We do get support from the university, but I will show you in the next slide the kind of activities that TILT is engaged in. So the main thing that I'm here to represent one of our practice and scholarship groups. I'll tell you more about our group in a moment, but there are many practice and scholarship groups at NTU supported by TILT. This is basically educators coming together, our staff members coming together based on common interest in multidisciplinary groups. We have groups that are focused on inclusive assessment or innovation in teaching, game-based learning, machine learning, academic integrity, you name it, we have it. As long as people are interested in it, they can start up their own groups and get support. We also have a range of awards and funding schemes within TILT, Seed Corn Fund, Spur. I'm not going to go into the details of these, but I've got the links on the slides for you if you're interested in how these work. Now, talking about our group, I wanted to tell you how I came to TILT myself. I found myself surrounded by very supportive colleagues within my department, but also felt that I needed to have the bigger picture. And I was interested in a range of different approaches and wondered what other people were doing at the university. And because we work in silos much of the time, TILT gave me this opportunity to meet people from all kinds of schools and interests and backgrounds. So the quote I have here is that the most valuable resource that all teachers have is each other. Without collaboration, our growth is limited to our own perspectives. And this is why I came to TILT. This is why I joined several groups, and ultimately now I am co-chair of one of the groups, which is called Education for Sustainable Futures. Now, our task is not easy. We don't really know what sustainable future will look like. We need to get students ready or even create something that we don't really know yet. We have visions of it, we have plans for it, but what can help us is a range of competencies that we can work towards with our students to help them understand what the future holds and how they can contribute. So I would recommend that you look at the new Advanced HE and QAA guidance on education for sustainable development. This is very recent. It was published in March. We have very interesting competencies that are cross-cutting, things like future thinking, creativity, critical thinking. So a lot of these competencies are can be applied in a multidisciplinary way. And our group, we come together because we want to work towards these competencies. We want our students to try new things, and we want to experiment with new things in our teaching. So for this, to achieve this, we have regular meetings, ongoing discussions, information sharing events. We also have regular group outputs. I'll show you a few examples on the next page. We do have some basic funding by Tilt, but our most valuable asset is our volunteer members' time. Now, some examples here, we have a teaching resource we created, a card game that you can see screenshots of here. Our members contributed to the publication of a book, Storytelling for Sustainability in Higher Education, which you can get through the link here. Also, we have joint events with some other. We have had some joint events with other practice and scholarship groups, and through the link you can see one of our events as well, where we are walking through here you can see in the picture, we're walking through the path of different futures and think about what we can do to avoid some of them and achieve some others. Now, to finish with, I just wanted to say that I feel lucky that we work at a university where a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us have this shared vision of a more sustainable world that we can create with the help of our students. And UNESCO defines this with this vision of a sustainable world with their 5 Ps model. So we go beyond environmental sustainability here. We don't just want to protect natural resources and prevent climate change, but we want to achieve a world where people do not live in poverty or hunger. We ensure dignity, equality. People live prosperous and fulfilling lives in peace, in fair societies. And to achieve this, we need to have partnerships. So it is a grand vision that we need to create, and we need to help our students create. And for that, it's really important that we have education for sustainable development and global citizenship, which is defined by UNESCO in their Sustainable Development Goal Target 4.7. And with this, I'll hand over to Helen, who will tell you more about the institutional approaches to how we do this at our university.
Thank you, Kathleen. So I'm going to tell you about a few of our institutional strategies and also approaches. So with the strategies, I'm kind of picking up from Rob's overview of how sustainability is integrated into teaching. With the approaches, I'm talking more about the ways that we've integrated it into academic practice. So to start with the strategies, so from Curriculum Refresh, which was in 2015 onwards, we've asked all courses to integrate at least one or more of the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's been a focus for course teams, as well as the other sort of actions and references that were in Curriculum Refresh. Sustainability has been something they've been embedding over the last few years in terms of Sustainable Development Goals, and we kept it at course level to give the course teams the sort of freedom to contextualise it to discipline and decide, you know, do we want to integrate sustainability in a broad sense, or do we want to have, you know, maybe one or more modules where students really go into depth on one of the SDGs and maybe some of those related targets and indicators. So it gives that sort of freedom to interpret it at an academic discipline level. So that's one of our strategies as a sort of foundation of integrating sustainability. A second one is having some co-curricular development opportunities. So I'll talk about those a bit more in the next slide. And they include Sustainability in Practice Certificate, which is an online course, and also a online staff course, which is called Future Thinking and the Sustainable Development Goals. We also, as the final point on our kind of strategic approach, we have a dedicated ESD team. So that's where Kathleen and myself work, and that's been going since about 2012-13 and started by Professor Petra Moulton-Hill. And we recognise that as a university, we're pretty lucky to have that dedicated team, so we can work with different departments, schools, courses, professional services, and look at all the different ways we can integrate it in sustainability into the academic experience, whether that's kind of employer challenges or looking at how it might fit with student projects. So, you know, I think we're very lucky to have that resource. So in terms of approaches, I'll talk about a few of the approaches that we have at NTU to kind of aligning sustainability with some of our existing academic practice. So student and staff development opportunities. So I'd mentioned there are a couple of kind of co-curricular opportunities. One of these is Sustainability in Practice, or SIP as we call it. So this is open to all staff and students. It's mainly students that take part, but also we get some staff members taking part as well. So this is an online course of 4 sessions and a final project. So participants can choose whether they do food, energy or clothing. So they choose a theme with which to explore sustainability, and they need to relate it back to their subject area, hence the kind of co-curricular approach rather than extracurricular. It needs to still help them sort of view their subject area through the lens of sustainability. An interesting aspect of SIP is that we've given it a flexible assessment format. So students or staff can submit their final project in basically whatever format they want. So we've had various things from fashion shoots to poems, stories, videos, posters, mood boards. So this gives the participant the opportunity to kind of showcase maybe some skills they've been developing, or try something new, try something a bit different to what they'd normally do in their subject area. So we find that that's quite popular, the idea of having that flexible assessment. And it's a way of exploring how that might work in credit-bearing courses. For SIP, it's not credit-bearing as it stands, although some courses do integrate it and attach credits to it. So that's SIP. We then have the Future Thinking and SDGs course, and this is aimed at staff. So this is mainly for staff who have teaching responsibilities. It focuses on how you might integrate the Sustainable Development Goals into your subject area. So this is, again, it's online. It takes half an hour to an hour to complete, and I'll tell you a bit more about it on the next slide. There's a few images of the course. So you can see here there's facts. So the course kind of starts with actually getting to know what the Sustainable Development Goals are, the targets and indicators, and some quizzes to kind of test people's knowledge on what they've just learnt about the Sustainable Development Goals. There is also a kind of section towards the end where there's interviews with academics who've already done this. So people who've already taken the SDGs and put them into their subject area, how did they do that? So some of them are talking about how they've integrated it into a student placement, for example. Others are talking about different benefits of having integrated it. So one colleague was talking about the fact that it made sure that students were contributing more with their own personal experiences. They found that that was a kind of a byproduct of integrating sustainability, was that people tended to bring in their personal experiences more than they had been. And then the last example here is curriculum example. So Kathleen mentioned kind of going down to the targets and indicators of the Sustainable Development Goals and what that can look like. So here we've got some examples within the course of where colleagues have really gone down to the sort of target indicators, this kind of quantitative way that the Sustainable Development Goals are addressed. So here, this example, the microbiology tutor has introduced a debate around accessibility to antibiotics. So they said that in the past, the students were learning about antibiotics from a microbiology point of view, and then adding in this debate to sort of critique around what they would normally be doing. For him, it didn't add much, it didn't need much more planning, but it gave the students a really different experience to what they would normally have in that module learning about antibiotics. It kind of allowed them to go to the macro view of antibiotics and what does this mean and access to them, and that wider kind of debate and big picture. Thank you. So I'll give a few examples of the academic practice level of where colleagues are kind of integrating sustainability. So one thing is authentic assessment, and I mentioned previously about sustainability in practice certificate, and that's, you know, an example of sort of flexible assessment. But also I think sustainability, it immediately gives you kind of real life situations, scenarios. So for students, it gives a tangible exploration of the subject area. So a few examples on the screen: the carbon neutral Nottingham. So Nottingham City Council has an aim of 2028 carbon neutral, and that's something we're engaging with as an institution. So we had a challenge week, for example, quite recently with Nottingham Business School, and, you know, students were getting involved in looking at possible solutions, ways to achieve this. And so that's a way that we can kind of engage with what's happening locally. So some community-based challenges. And that also includes things like service learning, so working with our third sector organisations. So for example, psychology students do a commissioned inquiry where they work with local community organisations, and they, you know, they have to complete a piece of inquiry for that organisation that's helping them achieve their aims as an organisation, and giving students that kind of that look into an authentic sort of real life scenario. So another way of approaching it is alternative capstone projects. So there's a link at the bottom there, which is to an NUS initiative, which is dissertations for good and also placements for good. So sustainability can be a kind of a useful lens for looking at a subject in a lot of depth. So with a dissertation, that might be sustainability themed. It might be possible that that would be where it could sit within a curriculum. Also, in terms of how it's brought in, I mentioned earlier that some courses are kind of looking at where modules want to specialise in sustainability, and that can be really valuable. Another way to do it is to think of a whole course approach, and where you could kind of thread sustainability through, perhaps using a few of the different SDGs, or thinking about how you kind of scaffold more complex perspectives on a sustainability issue. A synoptic assessment can be a good way of kind of bringing that learning together at the end of a course. Also, I'll go into a bit of detail on the next slide about flexible assessments. So this is our student Jenny Steele, and she took part in Sustainability in Practice Certificate. And she'll tell you a bit more in the video about how she found that the experience of doing, you know, choosing your own assessment format, basically. And she did a podcast.
Hi, good morning. I'm Jenny Steele, and I did my SIP project on sustainability. I really enjoyed the fact that you could choose which area to look at. So for mine, I did clothing and food. I actually had the intention of doing all three, clothing, food and energy, but I actually ran out of time. So for me, it would have been awesome if I had more time to do the third project. The reason I did it is generally because I'm interested in sustainability, and I thought it was a really great opportunity to learn about something that I otherwise wouldn't. So I self-motivated to get involved. I related it to my degree. I did my master's in broadcast journalism. So the reason why I made the podcast was because it was something that I was already doing. It was using the skills that I was already learning in university, putting that together to be able to make the project was really great. I think it's really important for students to understand these issues, because we're the ones that are going to be going into jobs and making changes, making waves, using our creativity to do new things. So what I learned doing the SIP, I've been able to apply in my everyday job. I work as a journalist now, and I'm thinking about the things that I did with SIP and how that can be incorporated into my work. And I think the fact that it was relevant for every degree course was really interesting. So I want to thank the Green Academy for putting that out there, putting it all together. And I hope that you guys enjoy the podcast if you have a little look at them.
Yes, so Jenny couldn't join us live for this because she's now working in the Caribbean, as you can see, as a journalist. but she, wanted to take part, so she sent us that video. So I hope you enjoyed hearing a bit more about how she found doing the sustainability project in practice certificate. You can find a link to her podcast as well as some of the other student projects at the end of the slides. So another way we kind of integrate sustainability into academic practice at NTU is through active collaborative learning. So this is something that we have been working on for quite a few years, developing different types of active collaborative learning. So we always did quite a lot of problem-based learning and research-informed teaching, inquiry-based learning. Something that we've been doing in recent years is Scale Up. And so there's a link there, you can find out a bit more about that, but that's where students work in small groups on set problems, and they take on different roles such as manager, scribe or skeptic. So it's kind of a formula, I guess, to group work. So, combining that with sustainability is a really nice way of the two getting the most out of both of those things, really, because for a sustainability solution to be found, quite often it needs multiple people, perhaps from different disciplines, working on it. So the two go, really well together. Collaborative research is mentioned here as well. So there's a link to WikiRate, and this is something that our students do in the Global Summer School that we run. So they have to research the different publicly available documents for various multinational companies, and they have to kind of rate them on their sustainability credentials. So it's a way for students to take part in a global research project, if you like, and all of their findings are shared on the website. So that's a nice kind of tangible way that students can work together on a sustainability project. So there are various ways that we could add value with sustainability. So rather than looking at sustainability as an add-on or something to kind of add into a curriculum, hopefully you can find some ways where sustainability can actually help you bring out things that you wanted to achieve anyway. So I'd say earlier on we were talking about the microbiology tutor who organised the debate around antibiotics. So that's mentioned here, debate and critique. We've talked a bit about real life application. Something that's coming up, Kathleen had mentioned with the QAA Advanced Hire, the competencies there. So there's few different types of thinking competencies, and that's useful to have a look at, because I think that's where sustainability or kind of sustainable thinking can help you bring out what you want the students to do anyway within your subject. Epistemic justice, so that a way of making sure that all ideas are valued and kind of all ideas on the table to start with, and then addressing an issue from that starting point. So place-based learning. So I'll give you an example of this. If you could just click this slide, Kathleen. So this is for any, shall we say, Nottingham boffins. So some of you might recognise that as George Green's Windmill. So this is in Nottingham. And George Green was the son of a miller, and he was also a brilliant mathematician. And he created George Green's theorem, which is what you can see on the slide here. And then if we click through, you can see that the theorem has been applied to many things, but one thing it's been applied within is the creation of hydropower. So in the middle, you can see where hydropower has been used in a dam in Iceland, and there it worked really well, did exactly what was intended, fantastic energy source for the surrounding area. When they introduced hydropower in Laos, in the Mekong River that you can see at the bottom there, same technique, same technology, but it didn't work. So although it produced power, it really affected the fish stocks. So for me, this is kind of a way that sustainability can help kind of anchor students to their local place. So for us, this would be, it's interesting, I think, to hear that Nottingham is where this theorem came from, and where they've used it in different places, and having some knowledge that you apply in one area, it might not work in another area. So it's a way of kind of exploring the different complexities and we can say on think global, act local, and I think this is an example of that here. So that's where place-based learning and sustainability go really nicely together. So a few considerations if you're thinking about how to integrate sustainability. We'd suggest that if you're providing frameworks, also give some practical examples, because what we found working with colleagues is that sometimes the theory and the framework make a lot of sense, and it's something that people want to engage with, but they've then got to go away and kind of translate it to their discipline, and that can be time consuming, that can be problematic. So having some practical examples whenever you're kind of presenting a framework or theory around sustainability is really useful. Dovetailing with local strategic priorities. So we talked about the carbon neutral 2028 for Nottingham. So what are some local priorities in your area that you could engage with and that your students could engage with? Collaboration. So for us, some of our kind of the work that has been most impactful has been where we've been collaborating, perhaps professional services and academics together. Employer challenges spring to mind there. Supradisciplinary, so that would be taking an issue that's above the disciplines. So for us with sustainability in practice, it's how can we feed the world sustainably? So starting with a question and then allowing the disciplines to sort of contribute to that in a natural way. Staff and students working together. So I think sustainability, again, it's giving these opportunities to collaborate, which is something that people are often interested in doing anyway, and having a sustainability theme can help you start something off there. So presenting solutions within and beyond spheres of influence to counteract eco-anxiety. So something that we're seeing more of is, eco-anxiety, people learning about sustainability, and actually it can be quite overwhelming. So I think that's something to bear in mind if you're integrating sustainability, that when you start to get into the complexities of it and the realities of it, it can be quite depressing. It can feel overwhelming. It can feel like the problems are too big. So I think presenting some solutions, it's not to sugarcoat it, it's to say, work is happening on this challenge that we have, and it also encourages some agency. So I think it's really important to sort of have a solution-oriented approach to this. So some future directions for us, and maybe for you as well. So one thing we're keen to do more of is in community engaged learning. So I guess feeding in with those local strategic priorities again. What can we do with that, whether it's in our courses or whether it's more sort of co-curricular stuff? Green recovery from COVID-19. So I think more and more people are recognising opportunities to do things differently, and how can we be a part of that through our work as a university. Also aligning with decolonising and diversifying. So I know the NUS, for example, is doing some work on decarbonising, decolonising. So there are links there, and I think it's worth kind of exploring them and seeing what that would mean for your institution and your academic practices. Utilising competencies. So we mentioned these earlier from the guidance. So I'd suggest having a look at those. Again, it's a way of kind of engaging with sustainability and getting value that you might be looking for anyway by introducing some different types of competencies. Linking with COP26 that's coming up. So again, what are some ways that you could engage with it? For us, we're looking at ways that we can engage as a university, and also integrating the QAA subject benchmark. So over time, sustainability is going to be integrated into all the subject benchmark. So that's something to kind of look out for in your particular subject area. So yeah, well, we hope that's given you kind of an overview of some of the things that we're doing. It's not covered everything, and some ideas for your own institutions and your own practice. There's a few more slides with links to different resources. Here's some student projects. So do have a look through those if you have time, and thank you for listening.